This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free slides that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
We've already said that trait theory has been discredited. We now come on to what's known as style theories. In other words, a good manager becomes a good manager because of the style of management. Whether or not this information helps you to be a good manager is another matter, but you have to know the names and the key terms that they were associated with. First, Peter Drucker, who stated that management has three functions. You have to manage a business, you have to manage other managers, and you have to manage the workers and the work. And he broke these down into 5 categories of activity. Drucker said that a manager's activities consist of setting objectives, organizing the group, motivating and communicating, measuring performance, and developing people. There are 2 important additions to what Fayol suggested. First, Drucker said that motivation is a very important part of management. And secondly, developing people is also important, so they feel fulfilled, that they are growing, that they are gaining new skills, that they're achieving their maximum potential. Really, the rest of the list isn't very much new on what Fayol suggested about planning, organizing, controlling, coordinating, and communicating. Mintzberg divided up managerial functions in a slightly different way. And again, whether you find this useful or not is irrelevant, but you must be able to associate the name Mintzberg with certainly the terms in red on this screen. He said there were interpersonal roles, arising from formal authority and status, and supporting the information and decision activities. Managers carry out information processing roles. For example, they monitor information, maybe by looking at management accounts, and they distribute information. And finally, managers have decisional roles, making significant decisions, perhaps about how resources should be allocated, negotiating with suppliers or indeed members of staff, and dealing with disputes, in other words, the disturbance handling role. Once again, knowing that management might have these 3 functions, interpersonal, information processing, and decisional, doesn't necessarily help one be a better manager. This slide shows 4 important terms regarding management and their definitions. First of all, power. Power is the ability to influence people or events. What gives people power? Well, it can be what's known as rational legal power. That's the power your manager has. You do what your manager tells you because that person is called manager, and part of your contract of employment implies that you should do what your manager tells you, provided that it's legal. Power can be coercive power, the use of force. It can be reward power, offering you more pay or promotion if you do what you're told. It can be knowledge power, the power that some people have because they have specialist knowledge, which they release selectively. And finally, it can be what's called charismatic power, the power that some people have simply by their force of personality or their charm. Of course, having power doesn't mean you have a right to exercise that power. If you have the right to exercise power, then you have what's known as authority. So, for example, you will be well aware of the term authority limits, where people might be able to buy fixed assets, say up to $1,000, but not beyond that. Having power without authority is poor, but also having authority without power is poor. We probably all remember some school teachers who have the authority, the right to tell the class to sit down and be quiet, but when they tried to exercise that authority, they had a complete lack of power over the class. Responsibility is the same as accountability. If you're made responsible or accountable for something, then as the saying goes, the buck stops with you. And finally, there is delegation, which is a transfer of authority. Note that it is the transfer of authority. You cannot transfer responsibility. If your manager asks you to do something, and you delegate that task to one of your staff members, and that staff member messes it up, when your manager reprimands you, you can't blame that staff member. The task was yours, and either you had to do it yourself, or ensure that you delegated it properly to a staff member who had the time and the skills, and whom you could supervise to make sure that the task was actually completed.